Hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was a worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did. And I travelled the world with him, and I did really enjoy working with him. But, you know, now I really don't care if I ever see him again, because the way he's behaved towards the king and our queen and his brother, and this is the story of Harry, though, you know, ever since he decided to leave the royal family and go his own way in the United States. And he's just behaving, I think, sometimes appallingly. Certainly some of the things he said about members of the royal family, certainly, and Camilla and Catherine and his brother. I think Meghan as well, referring to that Oprah Winfrey interview about, you know, the royals are racist in many ways because they questioned the colour of Archie's skin.
It was, a bit stupid. And also, as I say earlier, you know, it was a little bit insulting, you know, I mean, the thing about when Harry's ever spoken about the Queen, he speaks with absolute love and respect.
This story doesn't begin with internet rumors or anonymous posts. It begins with a man who stood close enough to royal history to document it for decades. Arthur Edwards is not a commentator. He's not a YouTuber. He's a royal photographer who spent more than 40 years inside the monarchy, capturing births, weddings, funerals, and moments that shaped the royal family across generations. When someone like that speaks, people listen. And when he reflects on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding, his reaction is immediate and unfiltered. He calls it the worst royal wedding he ever worked. That statement alone should make you pause. This isn't someone looking for attention. This is someone who has seen everything and is now saying that what the public was shown on television was very different from what unfolded behind the scenes. On screen, the wedding looked flawless. The music rose at the right moments, the procession moved smoothly, the camera angles were elegant. The world watched a ceremony that felt emotional, historic, and cinematic. But according to Edwards, what viewers saw was not a family celebration, it was a production. He describes Meghan as delivering the moment with the precision of a trained performer. Every expression appeared intentional, every movement seemed designed for the lens. It worked. The audience was swept into the spectacle, perhaps too easily. To him, it didn't feel like a private family event that happened to be filmed. It felt like an event designed specifically for broadcast. That difference matters. Look closely at who filled the seats. Instead of longtime royal figures and family members being placed front and center, many were quietly moved aside. People who had served the monarchy for decades found themselves pushed back, while celebrities with little connection to royal life were given prime visibility. In royal culture, seating is never random. It is symbolic. It communicates hierarchy, respect, and belonging. And on that day, the message was unmistakable. Tradition was no longer the priority. Optics were. Guests noticed immediately. The shift was impossible to ignore. Whispers moved through the room because when long-standing customs are broken this openly, everyone feels it. And the atmosphere inside the chapel told another story entirely. While viewers at home saw calm faces and elegant framing, those inside Windsor were struggling. The heat was overwhelming, guests sat tightly packed, dressed in heavy formal clothing with little relief. Makeup ran, people fanned themselves constantly. The mood wasn't joyful, it was uncomfortable. Edwards, who had worked royal events in every imaginable condition, described it as the most miserable engagement of his career, not because of weather alone, but because it felt like no one cared about the experience of the people in the room. Comfort was sacrificed for appearance. The wedding wasn't designed to be felt, it was designed to be seen. And once you understand that, everything else starts to make sense. Nowhere was that clearer than in how the press was treated. Royal weddings rely on a delicate balance. The monarchy grants access, photographers document history, the public remembers. That balance collapsed on this day. Edwards describes photographers being forced unnaturally far back, blocked sight lines, awkward angles, and heavy restrictions that made meaningful coverage nearly impossible. Long lenses replaced proximity. Moments were missed not by accident, but by design. Harry, in particular, avoided the cameras. He turned away deliberately, shifted his position, blocked shots openly, not subtly, not accidentally. To Edwards, it felt personal. Harry was angry with the British press over coverage of Meghan during their engagement, and instead of separating those feelings from the wedding, he carried them straight into it. The ceremony became a place to express resentment publicly. The result was unprecedented. For the first time in his entire career, Arthur Edwards left a royal wedding without a single photograph published. Not one. That doesn't happen by coincidence. It happens through intent. Every royal photographer knows the defining moment of a wedding, the carriage ride. It's the image that lives on in history books, the shot replayed for generations. Edwards was positioned perfectly. The carriage approached, and Harry and Meghan looked away. Not briefly, not nervously. They held their gaze in the opposite direction as they passed. The moment vanished. To Edwards, that wasn't shyness, it wasn't privacy, it was control. By then, the pattern was clear. Guests selected for visibility, tradition sidelined, the press treated as an adversary, history withheld in real time. The wedding wasn't chaotic, it was managed. Some guests hoped the reception would soften the tension. Royal receptions are known for generosity, abundance, and warmth. Long tables, full courses, a sense of welcome. That didn't happen. Instead, guests were met with what Edwards described as little more than a refined cocktail gathering. Small bites, decorative food that disappeared quickly, no substantial meal, no sense of hospitality. People who had endured hours of heat and formality were left hungry. Smiles stayed in place, but the disappointment was real. Royal weddings are not supposed to feel sparse. Once again, the message was subtle but unmistakable. Presentation mattered more than substance. And Edwards makes something else very clear. His criticism didn't come from the start. In Meghan's early days as a working royal, he spoke positively about her. He described her as engaged, warm, and promising, someone who could have become a real asset. That's important, because it shows this wasn't prejudice, it wasn't instant hostility. Something changed. By the time of the wedding, that change was visible everywhere. In the seating, in the press restrictions, in the tension that filled the room. When someone who once admired you later describes your defining moment as a disaster, it raises a difficult question. What shifted? Edwards' account doesn't land like a complaint about bad angles or uncomfortable conditions. It lands like a warning. Because when you line up everything he witnessed, the performance, the discomfort, the hostility, the control, the wedding stops looking like a celebration and starts looking like a declaration. If royal weddings are meant to unite families, this one quietly divided them. If they are meant to honor tradition, this one edited it out. If they are meant to welcome, this one restricted. What the public remembers as a fairy tale was behind the scenes the opening act of a fracture. And that's why this story still matters, because the tension people noticed later didn't appear suddenly. It didn't begin with interviews or accusations. According to the man behind the camera, it was already there on the day the world was told to celebrate. Once you see the wedding through that lens, it becomes impossible to unsee. It wasn't the ending of a love story, it was the beginning of a reckoning.
When a moment is meant to heal divisions, it usually brings people closer. But when a moment is engineered for control, it does the opposite. That is what made this wedding different. Not louder, not messier, just colder. After the ceremony and the restrained reception, many assumed the tension would fade with time. Royal history is full of awkward beginnings that softened later. But instead of softening, the distance hardened. And in hindsight, the wedding wasn't an exception. It was a preview. Arthur Edwards didn't describe a couple overwhelmed by pressure. He described a couple already separated from the institution they were standing inside. The body language told the story. Harry wasn't relaxed. He wasn't celebratory. He was guarded, alert, almost defensive, as if the entire event was something to endure rather than enjoy. That posture matters, because weddings don't just unite two people. In royal life, they signal allegiance. They show whether someone is stepping into the system or stepping away from it. And on that day, the signals pointed in only one direction: distance. From the moment the wedding ended, decisions began reinforcing what guests had already sensed. Traditional routes were altered, media access narrowed further, engagements became more selective, control tightened. The relationship between the couple and the press moved from cautious to openly adversarial. This wasn't gradual, it was immediate. For decades, the royal family maintained a tense but functional relationship with the media. They understood each other's roles, boundaries existed, but so did cooperation. That balance shattered almost overnight, and it didn't happen because of one article or one headline. It happened because resentment had already taken root long before the vows were exchanged. Arthur Edwards has spoken openly about Harry's anger toward the press, particularly in defense of Meghan. That anger didn't begin after the wedding. It was already there, simmering. The wedding simply gave it a stage. That's why so many experienced observers now look back at the event not as a celebration, but as a turning point, the moment where personal grievance overtook institutional responsibility. In royal culture, that's seismic, because the monarchy survives not by emotion, but by continuity, by understanding that no individual moment is bigger than the structure itself. When that understanding fractures, everything else becomes unstable. The wedding also revealed something else that would later become impossible to ignore: a shift in priorities. Royal events traditionally emphasize service, history, and symbolism. This event emphasized aesthetics, visibility, celebrity presence. The audience at home mattered more than the experience in the room. That wasn't accidental. Observers later noted that the wedding felt curated for an international audience rather than rooted in British tradition. Music choices, guest lists, framing, and pacing all leaned toward global spectacle rather than local continuity. Again, not wrong, just telling. Because when someone enters an institution and immediately reshapes it to fit their image, it signals discomfort with the institution itself. The aftermath confirmed it. Within months, frustration escalated into public conflict. Interviews replaced discretion. Accusations replaced quiet negotiation. Family disagreements spilled into global broadcasts. The same sense of performance that Arthur Edwards described at the wedding now appeared in media appearances. Emotion became messaging, and with that shift came consequences. Trust inside the family eroded. Private discussions turned into headlines. Once protected relationships became subjects of public debate. The institution that survived wars, abdications, and scandal found itself dealing with something more corrosive than controversy: unpredictability. Looking back, the wedding reads differently now. The seating arrangements weren't just about optics, they were about allegiance. The press restrictions weren't just about privacy, they were about power. The absence of warmth wasn't just discomfort, it was detachment. Arthur Edwards' account resonates because he doesn't rely on hindsight bias. He felt it in real time: the tension, the hostility, the deliberate distancing. Long before interviews, documentaries, or memoirs, the fracture was already visible to those who knew what to look for. That's why his perspective matters. Not because he disliked the couple, he didn't. Not because he wanted drama, he never chased it. But because he recognized when something fundamental shifted. Royal weddings are usually moments of reassurance. They tell the public that continuity remains intact, that tradition endures, that the future is secure. This wedding didn't do that. It unsettled people who understood the system, and when insiders feel unsettled, it's rarely without reason. In the years that followed, everything unfolded along the path that wedding hinted at: withdrawal from royal duties, relocation abroad, legal battles with the press, public criticism of family members, a complete breakdown of trust. None of it came out of nowhere. It began on a day the world celebrated. That's the uncomfortable truth. The warning signs weren't hidden, they were broadcast in real time, wrapped in music and pageantry. Most people missed them because they were watching the surface.
Arthur Edwards wasn't watching the surface. He was watching the structure underneath. And when he says that day was the worst royal wedding he ever covered, he's not talking about taste or preference. He's talking about consequence. Because in royal history, moments that look perfect on camera can still mark the beginning of decline. This wedding wasn't the end of a chapter, it was the first page of the one that followed. The fracture didn't appear later, it was present from the start. And once you understand that, the story of everything that came after no longer feels shocking, it feels inevitable.